You are listening to the Average Pundits podcast on your favorite streaming platform.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the Average Pundits podcast, your home of all things Premier League. And today we are talking about Tottenham Hotspur Club, which topsy-turvy season. We'll be going through it a little bit more in this breakdown and giving you our opinions, looking through some of their old results, some of the players they've signed, players they may need to sign, and some interesting other quips along the way. But as always, I am joined with Reese. How you doing, Reese?
Hello. Yes, it's Tottenham Hotspur. They're a bit stinky, aren't they?
Hit and miss with Spurs. I think hit and miss. I think definitely it was Jose's first full season with Spurs this year. So I think a lot of people had eyes on them very early on. Were very interested to see where they were how they were gonna lay the team out. And I think there's been a couple of injuries that set them back, but also there's just been some sloppy mistakes, which we will go on and talk about in some of the games. But yeah, I think there's still a bit of growth needed to definitely get Spurs to the place where they can go. But let's talk about where things have maybe gone a bit wrong first, Reece. I mean, if we look at some of their recent games, they've not all been too rosy, have they?
Well, I actually, first, before we go into those results, I actually kind of want to bring it back to something you just said and say it was Jose's first full season. Well, wasn't he signed like 2 months into this previous season?
That's a fair point. I think he was signed very early on, obviously due to the sacking of Mauricio Pochettino. But I feel like it was almost quite harsh to judge him based off that season, as a lot of people would say. I mean, like, he has to come in and make an instant impact because that's why they brought him in. But obviously, he's inheriting Poch's old squad. He's got a lot of the players which fell out of favour with Poch, who are looking to, bomb the new manager. And Mourinho's as controversial as they come. So I think it took maybe a bit of adjustment time, and we saw some players take to him, some players maybe not so much. But I think this season was the one where we fully had to look into it and think, okay, right, here's where Spurs are at.
Definitely. And we also got an interesting documentary out of it, and we wouldn't be as entertained by the documentary if Pochettino was there. So that's why you bring Jose in. It's all about the money.
All about
and all about the views. So yeah, let's go into some Spurs diving. It's not been a great season for them. They kind of had a really below average season, in my opinion. I mean, they currently sit 8th, and you put Spurs in this season. You kind of expected them to do better than 8th. Let's be honest. They sit 8th behind Everton and West Ham, both of which have had phenomenal seasons. Let's be honest. Like, Everton sat top of the table for a majority of the time. They sat in the top 4, and West Ham are in the top 4 right now. We just did a podcast. If you haven't listened to that podcast or watched that podcast, go back and watch it, because we deep dive into the entirety of the West Ham squad and why they're doing so well. This is kind of going to be the opposite of that, of why Spurs aren't doing so well. Until they played Burnley, the game just gone, where 4-0, they had some very uninspired form. You look at the past 10 games, and they had 6. I think they had 6 really poor results. I think one of those was a draw with Fulham. And four of those 10 games were wins, but they were very uninspired wins. You had a win obviously you had the win against Burnley. You had a 2-0 win against West Brom, which you probably could have said they could have played better in. But apart from that, you got the 2-1 loss against the team I've just mentioned, West Ham, a 3-0 loss to Manchester City, a 1-0 loss to Chelsea, who again aren't doing too well themselves. A 1-0 loss to Brighton, a 3-1 loss to, in Roy Keane's words, potentially one of the worst defending champions of all time in Liverpool. I mean, I can't argue with that, because we're doing awful as well. I mean, we sit just above Spurs, and our form at the moment could potentially be as uninspiring as them. So that's four wins in the last 10 games. And if you're looking at a team like Spurs, who everyone should be predicting top 4, that's poor. I don't know about you, Joe, but I think that for me, that's poor.
Yeah, I think that it's been a lot of missed opportunities, and it's, you get one good result, and it's all about keeping it up. And obviously, we say it so many times, the Premier League is the most competitive league on the planet, and clubs are there from lower down in the table to completely throw you off and to keep the stability of your season kind of, not on the right track you first wanted it to be. But if you look at some of the Tottenham results, I mean, in the Europa League, they've been performing quite well. which is a positive sign. I think maybe you could look at the season and wonder, is Jose got his eyes elsewhere? Because, I mean, you got a League Cup final later to be played against Manchester City, which is going to be maybe a bit of an uphill struggle.
They're going to lose that.
I think they're going to lose that as well. I also think that, in a sense, they've almost been robbed of momentum because they got to the League Cup final in very good form. But if they would have, because they pushed the League Cup final back in the hope to get in fans in, which I think was very, it's looking now maybe, but it could still be very wishful thinking. But if they would have kept it around at the time that they were originally planning to play it, and Spurs had this run of form, we could have seen a much more interesting game. But obviously, we're hoping to see Son fully fit, Kane fully fit in that game. So it could be a little bit more, a little bit more of a fruitful game at the time. But I still worry about Spurs in that. But I 100% agree with you. I think at the moment it's missed opportunities in some of these games. But I mean, even if he is focusing on the League Cup in Europe, it is a shame because they have a squad which are capable, especially in the current season we're in, to finish in the top four. And I'm wondering if that is going to happen.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the cup fight. There was a funny video I watched the other day, and it was there was a guy that's not interested in football, but he knows how to make money off it, and he just bets on Spurs not to win a trophy every single year, and it works out. So
Wow.
it's a simple bet. Spurs don't win trophies, and that's kind of been the norm. They like to compete for trophies. They get they get 90% of the way, and then it's an instant drop off, and that's going to be the League Cup this year. Whether they can win the Europa League, I don't know. They won, what was it, 4-0 against a bunch of farmers against Wolfsberger. So it's, I don't know where it's going wrong for Spurs. Maybe it's their defensive displays, or maybe it's their lack of attacking output other than those two players that they've got up front.
Yeah. Well, let me throw a few players at you because there's some players I was kind of thinking of which could be part of the problem. I mean, I think the evident issue mainly with Spurs at the moment is the defensive woes. And I'll start talking about Eric Dyer before I go too much into it. At first, you're looking at near to the start of the season. He was like their best player. He was in esteemed form, and he was looking like the kind of player which he was a few years back. And when he was fighting to get into that England team, strong, commanding, and there was good partnership there. He was playing alongside Alvaro, he was playing alongside Sanchez, but he was the one who looked competent. But now, again, maybe the confidence has gone again, and he's going up against, obviously, Toby Alderweireld has been one of the best centre backs in the Premier League for the past decade, realistically. And if you look for the past 10 years, whilst he's been at Spurs and he was also performing at Southampton, he has been an extremely prominent defender for Spurs. So I think maybe a few seasons ago they missed a chance on getting a big fee for him, especially with his increasing age. But he stayed at Spurs, and they can benefit from his experience. But Davinson Sanchez was going to be the torchbearer, wasn't he, to come into this now? And I remember going back all the way to the Europa League final where United played Ajax, and that was an extremely dominant display from United to win that tournament. But that Ajax team was so young, and a lot of the players we've seen from that team have gone on to do great things. But Davinson Sanchez was one of those players that I was watching thinking, wow, this guy is going to be special. I think he was the best person for Ajax in that game. When Spurs got him, I was furious. I was thinking, how on earth has that gone under the radar? How have they got him? But what's the rest of the league's loss is Spurs' gain. But again, there's questions about Sanchez as well. I'm not sure maybe whether he would benefit from leaving Spurs, or he needs another commanding centre-back to be solidified to play with him in that role, because I still think out of everyone the Spurs have got, one of the out of those three defenders that I've mentioned, Davinson Sanchez has the most potential to be that solidified centre-back pairing with somebody else. But, who that could be, we'll talk about a bit later on. But Davinson Sanchez and Eric Dyer, defensive issues there, Reece. I don't know what your opinions are of those guys.
The thing is, right, I do see the argument for the centre backs being to blame for a lot of the defensive woes, but you look at that Spurs team and who did they bring in? They brought Sergio Regulon in, and Real Madrid got a buyback clause just in case he plays really well, and they can bring him back at some point. So I think they've got a really good defender there. But then you look at the right side and who they brought in. They've got Serge Aurier still there, and you've also got Matt Dougherty, who just came from Wolves, and he hasn't really integrated into the team at all. Let's be honest. He has been probably one of the biggest flops of the season. probably with another Spurs loanee that came in. But yeah, I think Matt Dougherty has just come in and not done much with the squad. I think he's as much to blame for the defensive woes as, say an Eric Dyer would be.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, I think it's Eric Dyer and Matt Dougherty, because if you have these two centre backs, they could be fantastic. But if you look at previous teams, if you don't have a great right back or great wing backs to cover for you, then you're not gonna have that defensive output that you want, because you
Mm.
can't just rely on your two centre backs to do all the defending. If you don't have right backs that are tracking winger runs or left backs that are tracking runs, then you're going to be allowed to be attacked from both sides. And yes, it's all good and well not allowing strikers to come through the middle, but if you get attacked from the wings, say that 3-1 loss against Liverpool, attacked straight from the wings, who's going to stop Sadio Mane, Sergio Aurier, Matt Doherty? Not a chance, because they don't have the pace to keep up with him. So I think for me, um, not only does it, the blame lies on Dyer, but I think more should be magnified onto Matt Doherty.
I think it's an interesting point to highlight, because obviously the main reason they brought him in, and when they brought him in, I was thinking, okay, that's a tactical decision. He's a more forward progressing player who's been playing under Nuno, who is one of the managers who's revolutionized attacking fullbacks in the Premier League. He's part of that kind of wave. But obviously he comes in with that current mindset, and the person they had before was obviously Sergio Aurier, who wasn't consistent enough, and that was part of the reason they were looking to bring in a new right back. And it was Dougherty's poor form which kind of gaslighted Aurier and made him, yeah, because this is the thing. He has a few games where he plays really well, and then he goes back to the typical Aurier, which you see people criticize him for, and he just seems reckless, and he's just not looking at what's happening around him. So similar to the Shaw and Teller situation at United, I think they brought in this player and then he kind of gaslighted the other one, but now they've kind of both fizzled and they're both kind of in this grain of the normal Aurier we're used to, and a Matt Doherty which just hasn't hit the heights. So I agree with you that I feel like he hasn't integrated well much at all. I mean, he's 28 as well, so he's in the prime of his career. I thought he was a bit younger than that, but 28 years old. The other centre back they brought in, which obviously we'll talk more about in the signings, was Joe Rodon, and 22 years old from Swansea, Welsh international. There's he needs to grow, doesn't he? There's more to him.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of future investments. So it's like when Liverpool bought that kid from, I can't remember. I think it was Preston. I can't remember his name. He's very unmemorable, because I think I went through a point of hating those signings at that point. But yeah, I think there's a lot of building for the future. You got Juan Foyth in there as well, who's not ready to be integrated into that team, but he's hyped massively. And as a young player, I don't see why he's been hyped so much, as he's not been able to get into the Spurs team as of yet. But we'll have to see if he can get into that team. But yeah, I think he's going to be one of those future builds where he's going to be fitting into that Spurs. Well, they're hoping he's going to be able to fit into that Spurs team at a later date.
Yeah. Well, in terms of defensive errors, that's been the main kind of area. I mean, not so much a problem position, but obviously Hugo Lloris isn't getting any younger, so goalkeeping issues I think is something they need to focus on in the future. But one specific player in the midfield who has been generating quite a lot of talk, I'd say.
Before we get into this specific player, I want to highlight, because I think I know where you're going with that, and we highlighted it before the podcast started. I kind of want to move from the midfield to the attack, because I think there is a bit of a problem there in their attacking output. Not with Kane and Son though. That's the thing. Okay. So I just want to highlight their attacking output and where it's going to improve. Okay. Because it's been proved that Spurs can score goals at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
But we look at the rest of the team. Son and Kane can't do all the work. Let's be honest.
No.
Son and Kane this season have been absolutely unreal. Both of them combined have 27 goals. The rest of the team have 14. The third highest goal scorers behind, I think it's Harry Kane, is Gareth Bale, or Tanguy Ndombele, or Lucas Moura. All of those on 3 goals. compared to, I think it's Kane's 13, or it might be Son's 13.
Yeah.
That for me is a huge reason why, because they're not being able to create any goals. Harry Kane from striker is creating a lot of the goals. I'm not sure how many assists he's on at the moment, but he hit 10 very close to the start of the season. We were talking about this on a previous podcast about the dynamic duo of Heung-min Son and Kane. Again, go back and watch that. It just shows the Spurs side are relying on Kane and Son. They brought Gareth Bale in, and I guess we'll go on to talk about him a bit later. But he's been just poor. Just I can't find any other words than poor. They haven't got any other output. Lucas Moura has been pretty tragic this season. He hasn't been at his best. He's always going to be glorified in Spurs fans' eyes because he scored that glorious goal to take them to the Champions League final.
Yeah.
And they've got, I think, is Eric Lamela still there? I'm not even.
Harry Miller is still there, very present.
I'm not even too sure because he's doing nothing at the moment. The last thing I remember him doing was scoring a Rabona in one of the cups. Like, there's no attacking output from him. I don't think he plays anymore. And I think Giovanni Lo Celso holds a good role in the midfield, but in terms of going forward, I don't think he offers up that much. So, in terms of attacking, I just wanted to raise that point before we go on to the next problem child in the Spurs team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do definitely see where you're coming from, because they can't be reliant on Kane and Son alone, because their injuries do come up, and you see when, more or less, when Kane's injured. Obviously, when Son's there, it's when one of them's there, but when Kane's injured, they all seem to just crumble now. There were times, I think, when they brought it to the Champions League run, there was saying, I wonder if Spurs played better with Kane, because we play better without Kane, rather, because we did see some good performances there. But now he is, no doubt in anyone's mind, he's the focal point of the team. So I feel like there are definitely questions to be asked there from their attack. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But yeah, definitely, I think you knew the direction I was going to go in. He's been generating a lot of talk. Dele Alli started in Mourinho's good books, then kind of fell out of Mourinho's good books, and now I don't even know what book he's in. He came on, he scored that absolutely ridiculous bicycle kick the other day. I think that was in the Europa League, and then that was a beautiful goal. But he seems to be out of favour at Spurs, and he's only 24. He's not a young player anymore. He's in the golden years of his playing career, but young enough to still attract interest and potentially get a move. And the club that was generating a lot of hype for him was PSG, to link up with Mauricio Pochettino again, which I think would have been an interesting move for him. But Dele Alli, what do you think about Dele Alli?
So I've done quite a bit of a deep dive into Dele Alli. Starting with his, he had a fantastic couple of seasons in a row. I think it was the 15-16 season where he started to finally shine, and then he came in at the 16-17 season and had an amazing, bright spark to him. He looked like he was going to lead the Spurs team into the new half of the year. He was going to lead them into the new decade, the 20s, as we, as that shining light, the next England, glimmer of hope. I think this was maybe slightly before Marcus Rashford, maybe. Before Marcus Rashford was starting to make it, so he was the glimmer of hope. Him and Raheem Sterling were like the two golden boys of the English era, and it was great to be coming off the back of the Euros in 2016 and going forward into this World Cup, where it was so everything in England was great. Dele Alli, he had a pretty good World Cup as well. I think he played a couple of good games. Ever since that World Cup has stopped, Dele Alli has also stopped, because his motor just, it seems to be running, but there's nothing on the gas at the moment. There's no foot on the pedal at this point. He's been below average at best for me, anyways. This season he's made 7 appearances. 6 of those have been off the bench.
Yeah,
and I think we saw in that documentary, the documentary on Amazon Prime, Jose Mourinho outright said that Dele Alli was lazy, and I believe him. I believe that Dele Alli is one of the laziest people in the world, not only because of, I think he just doesn't have the manager to bring it out of him, whereas Mauricio Pochettino was that guy to believe in him and bring this out of him. Dele Alli was starting to slow under Pochettino. But I think that's just because his game was changing, and he's lacking that motivation to carry on. Um, I think that I just think that Jose's not a big fan of him anymore. He's not. I think Jose knows when there's a big talent. You know, he believed in Marcus Rashford when he was at United. He believed in Martial. He believes in all these young players. Did Greenwood get a start under Mourinho?
Greenwood was getting a lot his game from Mourinho, yeah.
He believed in Mason Greenwood because he saw star talent, and I think that Dele Alli kind of hit his peak too early, and he's suffering. He's not getting the game time. For me, I think he either needs to get a better work ethic, or he's gonna have to get a transfer away to a manager that's gonna get this hard work out of him.
Yeah, no, I think as we mentioned before, PSG were the club that were being linked to him, and I think that would be a good move. I think he goes and links up with Maurizio Pochettino again. He would know how to get the best out of him because he played the best football of his career under Pochettino. Definitely towards the end, relationships were frayed. I don't think just with Ali, I think with the whole squad. But maybe it is a move out of the Premier League, slowing down a little bit, going to an already successful club, but having the tools around you to enable the player that you can be. I mean, we saw a lot of ex-Premier League players go over there in recent years. You've seen Ander Herrera from United, Idrissa Gueye from Everton. There's loads of players that can go over there and generate success, being incorporated in that PSG midfield. So I think it would be a smart move for him. I think that could be something we see in the not too distant future. So I think it's a really interesting breakdown you've done there. But I mean, I want to move on now to kind of discussing some of the players that they brought in the summer, because I've got the whole list just turned down to the side of me here. In terms of actual arrivals, there was a fair amount. There was more than I actually suspected on face. I believe there was eight arrivals into the club, which they actually paid a fee or they managed to bring in on loans or negotiated a fee for. In terms of how much they actually spent, it was actually 99.45 million.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. And I've thought of an interesting game for these transfers. Okay, so you're going to list them off, okay, and I'm going to rate them out of 10 as their time in Spurs so far.
Okay, interesting. I think that will be interesting.
Let's play the rating game. This could be a new feature on the podcast.
We'll go from the top down then. So we'll talk about, it's a little bit of a cheat signing because he was already there, but the fee came in during this summer, so it does count. Giovanni Lo Celso, the Argentine central midfielder, only 24 years old. I think they paid 28.8 million for him, which I think was a very good fee.
Yeah, in terms of fees, it was great, and in terms of his output as well, he's not done bad. He's not been the sole focus of anyone's blame. I think he's been one of the most consistent players for Spurs. Let's be honest, like behind Son and Kane, he's been one of the ones that's been playing well. He's been one of the ones to rely on. He's doing a lot of the passing, and yes, his defensive work isn't where it should be for a central midfielder, but it's definitely not the worst. There are a lot of worse players in that Spurs team than Giovanni Lo Celso. So for that fee as well, for me, I think he gets a good 7 out of 10 so far. Like, yes, Spurs haven't been too great, but I don't think any of that blame can lie on Giovanni Lo Celso.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's one of their more prominent players and a good acquisition and experienced as well. So I think I'd agree there. Moving on, Sergio Regulon, only 23 years old from Real Madrid, 27 million price tag fee, generating a lot of hype. Spurs were very good to get him, but obviously that buyback clause still remains. In terms of the actual player himself, I wonder how you think he's done for Spurs.
I think that there's a lot of room to grow there. He came from Real Madrid, so he's definitely going to be a fantastic player. And whether Spurs can keep hold of him, whether Real Madrid can buy him back, I'm not sure. I'm not too sure on buyback clauses and how much Real Madrid are going to have to spend for him, but to get him back. But Spurs could make a tidy profit off this if they do, and if not, they're stuck with a very good player. I think this is the same with Giovanni Lo Celso. I don't think that any blame lies within him. I think that he's performed very well, and I think that he's been able to keep the Spurs defense from conceding even more goals. They conceded 3 against Manchester City, but so did Liverpool conceded 4. So it just shows that him being put into that team has got a few less goals. And I think that for me, I think there is a lot of room to grow. I think it could be the same, like maybe like a 6, 7 out of 10 for
Yeah,
me for Regulon.
yeah. Moving on again, we've already spoken about this guy. I totally agree with you on terms of Regulon as well. I think he's been a very good player for them so far, and definitely room to grow. Matt Dougherty at right back, 15.12 million spent to Wolves.
So it's not too bad of a fee, 15 million from Wolves. But then again, you like, what do you expect when you're buying someone that's 28 years old from a club that's not inside the top six?
Yeah,
I put that in quoted, because there isn't a top six. But say there's the lesser team in Wolves, and Matt Doherty's come from there. He's 28. He's not getting any younger. He's hitting the peak of his career, and he's just not playing well. There was a reason why he started off in the Championship with Wolves in the first place. So I think for me, uh, it's a tricky one because he hasn't played well at all. Let's be honest. Him and Sergio Aurier are the worst in terms of depth at the right back position that you could ask for.
yeah.
So yeah, I think in terms of rating, maybe like like 2 to 3 out of 10.
Yeah, I think that's kind of fair based on the current assessment of how he's done so far in the season. Moving on to a player which I think I remember at the time I described as a bit of a nothing transfer, but he's been one of Spurs' most prominent players this season at different points in time. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg from Southampton.
Yeah, he's a really really big glimmer of hope for them at the moment. As soon as they signed them, I was like, really, is this the central defensive midfielder that let in let in 9 against Leicester last season?
Mm.
You know, but I mean, you look at that result against Manchester United, and it definitely wasn't his fault. So you kind of have to look at him and be like, yeah, he's been one of Spurs' best players this season. I think, yeah, maybe behind, just above Lo Celso there. Um, you look at a player like Harry Kane and Son that are doing the attacking outwork. Højbjerg is the one midfielder that's actually pressing defensively. So for
Yeah.
me, he gets so far that he has a lot of room to grow. So I think he gets an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. No, again, he's been one of the more prominent players, and I think there was real hype around him at Southampton for so long. Obviously, they're bringing him in from, it was Bayern Munich originally. Only 25 years old as well, so he's still so young. So we still, in the prime of his career, we've still got loads of time to see him grow. But 14.94 million, what a fee to get him for as well. But moving on, Joe Rodon, the 22-year-old Welsh international, 6.3 million from Swansea. Sorry, I stand corrected about that. 10.9 million from Swansea, going up a little bit more there. Still not too much they spent on him, but a room to grow player, I think we said.
For a player that's not going to start, 10 million is a bit of a fee, especially when you're paying just 5 million more for a player that's going to be starting in that right back position prominently. You look at Matt Doherty, they paid 15 million for him, and 5 million less will get you a promising centre back.
Yeah.
So he's young. I think that I'm going to give him a rating based on if he can grow, because the signing rating can go upwards or downwards. I think in terms of the fee, it's brought that down a bit. So I think I'm going to go for 4 out of 10, but that could grow depending on how he grows as a player.
Yeah. Moving on again, Carlos Vinicius from Benfica, 25-year-old striker. The deal is at the moment it's only a loan to Spurs right now, but I think it might be with an obligation to buy. I'm not massively certain on that, but Carlos Vinicius, we've mainly seen him in Europe and other competitions, but he's done all right when he has scored goals when he's come off the bench.
Yeah, he's good in terms of. I think Spurs needed that strengthening in depth at striker. I think that was what they needed, and I think that last season we saw that Spurs weren't getting a lot of goals when Harry Kane wasn't on the pitch, and that's something that they needed to work on. Vinicius is a very promising player. I think he's a pretty young player still, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's only like 20, 25, I think.
There we go. So I think he's still got a lot of room to grow, and it would be nice to see him bag some goals against some teams that aren't, DIY specialists on the weekends. But yeah, and maybe seeing him, have some promising starts in the Premier League. So we'll have to see what he gets. I think for me it's a 5 out of 10, but again with room to grow.
Oh, what a specialist! I don't know. That got me.
Working with Nick Knowles in 60-minute makeovers.
Moving on. Another player they brought in. This one doesn't really offend me too much. I thought it was a bit like okay, but it's fine. Joe Hart on a free transfer from Burnley, 33-year-old goalkeeper now, substitute goalkeeper. I don't really see much issues with that.
It's exactly what Liverpool did with Adrian from West Ham. Joe Hart was not going to get used at Burnley. You know, they got Nick Pope, who is a very, very good goalkeeper. Could be worth in England. I think he at the moment he could be England's number one.
Could well be.
Or maybe, you know, Pickford might have that now that Everton are picking up some form. But Nick Pope is definitely in there, and I think Joe Hart. This was a good move for him as well. He'll get some really good game time in the cups. I think he's had a couple of good displays in the cups so far as well. So, yeah, I think it's where they needed to strengthen, and I think that it was a smart decision. So, in terms of Joe Hart, I think he gets a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. Harmless signing, really. I think Spurs have always had pretty good backup keepers. If you look over the years, so Michel Vorm, Gazaniga was good as well, and Joe Hart added to that list. So definitely good for depth. And the last player to talk about, it's the loan transfer for Gareth Bale. He's come on, he scored goals. He's been injured as well. Then he also hasn't been coming on. I think in overall, you have to rate it lower. I think I'd put it personally at around a 4 because I don't think it's fantastic at all. And I also don't think they should make that deal permanent. I think that would be terrible business to make it permanent.
In terms of hype, you have to give him a 10 out of 10 for hype. That's about it. The boy wonder coming home. You know, the guy that sparked magic for Spurs. The first qualification for the Champions League was because of this Welsh dynamo. Goes over to Real Madrid for, at the time, the new world record fee.
Yeah.
You know, just after Cristiano Ronaldo, I think it was 85 million.
Yeah, I think it equates that in sterling. Yeah.
Yeah. So you look at that and you're like, oh my God, you know, he's coming back. He's had a really bad spell at Real Madrid because he's not getting played. And you know, we were thinking maybe it was just Zidane that didn't like him. Comes on in the Champions League in 2017-18 and scores an absolute blinder of a wonder goal, you know, of a bicycle kick against Liverpool. And you know, so we were like, oh, this is what he can do. Comes to Spurs, and he's had a very average time. He's probably been below average actually for a guy like Gareth Bale. People are thinking that he's going to come back and work wonders. You know, he's going to come back and get into his old form. He's not what he once was. He doesn't have the pace. He's injured. Injuries have taken a massive toll on him, and it just shows that, you know, yes, he's been on the bench at Real Madrid, but that's just because he's out of favour. But when he's gone on, he's played really well. So people are like, oh, he's coming to the Premier League, but people seem to forget that the Premier League is much better than La Liga. So in your face, Spanish people. Yeah, I think for me, Gareth Bale has been very, I can't even say disappointing because I don't expect a lot from him. So I think for Gareth Bale, it was a chance to show that he could have a career resurgence. But I don't think Spurs are going to be looking to sign him on a permanent deal. So for me, you said a 4, I say a 2.
2. That's fair enough. I can see your reasoning there. But yeah, so an interesting selection of players they brought in, and obviously, like I said before, just under 100 million spent. And I think the signings that they brought in, it's really hit and miss. For every like 2 good ones, there's a bad one, and it's been like the majority of them have been quite good. I think about 60-40, but you know, in order to progress, especially to going forward next season to get to where they want to go to, they're going to have to improve. So we come up with a few different players and a few different areas where we're going to discuss what Spurs could improve. If I highlight my problem areas, then you highlight yours. I would love to hear who you've got signings in your list to go for first. But in terms of the problem areas that I wanted to fix as a priority for Spurs right now, I've gone for the centre-back position, and I've also gone for the right wing position. I could have thought maybe about doing something in the centre, but I think right now that's where I'm going to be focusing my attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the centre-back position is definitely what was needed. I think they could improve on the right-back position, but I don't think there's any like right back, like teams that would be willing to sell their right backs just because of how reliable team like players now on those right back positions. So I think I'm going to stick to. I think I actually might stick to those. I think those problem areas are that centre back and that right wing position. Those are the key areas. You know, Lucas Moura hasn't been too great this season, and yeah, Eric Dyer probably needs to get shifted out of that centre back position. So I think I'm with you there.
Yeah. Well, who are some players that you're thinking of? Then I'll let you go first. I'm very interested to hear who you're thinking.
So I have one in the centre back position. I think we should start with the centre back position. I'll go centre back,
Yep.
and then we'll hear yours. So for me, well, first of all, I was thinking, go big, go someone in their, about to hit their prime. He's 26 years old, Alessio Romanoli from AC Milan. But they had a very good start to the season, but they've kind of mellowed out a bit. And in terms of who is performing as one of the best centre backs in the world at the moment, you look at these teams that are winning aerial battles, they're getting the tackles, blocks, and someone that actually could handle the ball from the back. And I've gone with a very young, promising Brazilian centre back from I think Sevilla, and that's Diego Carlos. And his market value is about 45 million, and it's going to take a lot of money to pry him away from Sevilla. Let's be honest. And per 90, he's got 2.62 aerials won per 90, 1.96 blocks per 90, and a percentage of pass completion percentage of 88.8% from the back. That includes long passes and just passing to the midfield. I think for a centre back, someone that's promising as him would slot in a dream. He's also extremely quick for a centre back. I think for me, he would slot in a dream next to Toby Alderweireld.
Yeah. That was someone I was looking at as well. That's someone else. Yeah, it's a good, great minds think alike, clearly. 27 years old, still young, but I think definitely in the kind of the prime years of his career. But right now, that centre-back pairing at Sevilla of Jules Koundé and Diego Carlos is pretty formidable. So I think I could have said Jules Koundé as well. Only 22 years old, but I think Spurs, a bit like kind of what you said, they need someone to kind of generate a lot coming forward from the back, but they also need a leader. I use this mold. It's so unique. It's going to be hard to find, but like how Liverpool have a captain in Henderson and a vocal leader at the back in Van Dijk who can control the narrative of the team and can gain the respect of his players. That's what I feel that they need. So Diego Carlos was somebody I had a look at, but the one that I've been focusing on quite intensely is Milan Skriniar from Inter Milan. Now, Spurs have been linked with him prior. Jose Mourinho, I think, is understood to be quite a big fan. He was interested in him whilst he was at United. And, he's followed that interest through to Spurs as well. I think another one of the players he was very keen on was Ruben Diaz. And they let him slip through their fingers. United let him slip through their fingers. He's gone to City, and he is one of the best players in the league, let alone, obviously, one of the best centre-backs, if not the best centre-backs this season, but one of the best players in the league as well. But Milan Skriniar, 26 years old, he's very vocal at the back. He's a powerful, experienced defender. He's ranked around 50 million euros, so it would cost quite a lot to get him out of Inter Milan because clubs have already tried. I think even Real Madrid have tried, and Inter are like, no, you're going to have to pay a lot more than what you've just said. So I think if they want to tempt him, they're going to be looking at around spending, in my opinion, 60 to 70 million, which is an awful lot of money, especially for Spurs. They might have to break their current record for Ndombele. But I think a leader is what they need, and Skriniar someone who I think would be a really good choice. But Diego Carlos was my number 2, so it's clear that great minds do think alike.
Well, why do you think we've got this show?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. And there were other players in my list that were more of a younger demographic. I had Jules Koundé, I had Pau Torres at Villarreal as well, another really interesting young player. And then also I went to the Bundesliga and looked at Edmund Tapsoba, I believe his name is.
From Leverkusen, yeah?
From Leverkusen, yes. Not too familiar with him myself, but again, a young talent performing well in the Bundesliga this year, but it's the leader role that I want to see at Spurs for progression. So between Skriniar or Diego Carlos, I think those guys could come in and make a really good impact. But we were mentioning right wingers as well.
Yeah, I think I want to hear yours first because I'm still umming and ahhing about mine.
Okay, well, maybe I should first elaborate a little bit before I go in and say who I'm thinking of. This season, again, I'm going to wait for the context. This season, it's looking more likely than not that Jadon Sancho could be a risk of leaving. I think that they have to throw their hat in the ring for him because he had a very slow start to the season and now he's picked right up. And him and Haaland, again, one of the most formidable duos in Europe in their own respective leagues, absolutely shooting all over the park. So I think they'd be stupid to not actually invest in a player like Jadon Sancho. They should throw their hat into the ring, show some ambition. He's also a London boy as well. That could tempt them, but that was more of a wishful thinking signing. If they're looking at tempting in a right winger to come into the club, there's a few other ones which sprung to mind as more realistic signings for me. At Sassuolo, there's Domenico Berardi, a Sassuolo player, stroke Juventus player, then back to Sassuolo. He's somebody who knows how to score off the right. He's 26 years old. He can add to that attacking contribution, and he almost kind of like cuts in closer to play as that second striker. So I think that could be quite interesting. A front three which also are scoring goals could be very interesting. But the one that I've kind of highlighted as well as another potential, it's a little bit more of a risk, but I think it could be an option. I actually mentioned him, I think, in the Wolves rebuild episode, Leon Bailey.
Yeah.
Who, again, a left winger I've known him as, but I think also plays over on the right. I've mentioned all of my reasons why I think Wolves should get him if you want to check it out in the previous podcast for Wolves. But I think he is a really good player, and I think he could still come into the Premier League and do an awful lot. If you're looking at Bailey as well, you're spending around £35 million, I think, and then Berardi around 30. So you're going to be spending similar fees, but there'll be room left to spend, hopefully, if Spurs come with a bit of ambition. There's a couple of players I want to mention about selling later on, but those are my right wing suggestions. Don't know about you.
So I got one, and it's a player that came about. People started really listening to this guy in the World Cup in 2018 when he scored on the first match day against Germany.
Yeah,
and it's Hirving Lozano from Napoli, and I think he's 25 years old. He's got I think he's got nine goals, 2 assists in the Serie A at the moment, which is triple any other of Spurs' players right now that isn't Son or Kane. It's triple Gareth Bale's. So if we're looking at that right wing position, it's triple Gareth Bale's and it's triple of Lucas Moura, both who play off the right. And I mean, we can just forget about Lamela. I think for me, Lozano brings a lot of flair. He brings a lot of quickness, something that Gareth Bale is not bringing at the moment. Dribbling ability, he's agile, his balance is on point. He's probably one of the most exciting players in the Serie A at the moment. He's 25, which means he's not reached his prime yet, which means if Spurs were to jump now, they could get his prime years. Yeah. And you look at where Son was when he first signed. He wasn't exactly the world-class striker or left winger that we thought he was. He blossomed into. Now look at where he is. I think under Jose, I think it could be potentially be a Jose type of signing. That right winger that can dribble, cut inside and score. I think he could create a lot of trouble for a lot of left backs in that position because of his dribbling ability, because of his pace. And I think that once you get into the box, it's only a matter about finishing. And you look at these right wingers that have what Lozano has without that finishing ability. You look at Adama Traore, you have a look at Alan Saint-Maximin, all these exciting players that people are raving about because of their dribbling and pace. But then Lozano adds in that factor of being able to finish and score. So I think that could be a very dangerous trio up top.
See, it's interesting because out of the players we've mentioned, let's say that you have a signing summer of Diego Carlos and Hirving Lozano. Let's say I have Skriniar and Leon Bailey, for example. Both of those combinations are nearing around anywhere between 80 to 100 million. And if we have a look and compare that to the summer they've just had, they did spend just under 100 million, but they were able to bring in 8 players for varying fees. One thing I think the stigma that Spurs have to break is not being afraid to bring in less players, because they filled a lot of gaps this summer, which was good. They filled a lot of gaps they had, and for good fees. Well, they bartered and they haggled, just like they Spurs are gonna do. They're just like how they've been doing for quite the past few seasons, whether that's through their wishes or not. But just spending 100 million on 2 players and 8. I think Daniel Levy is going to be a little bit deterred by that on face, but I think he could do it. They need some Galactico players.
But they can get that money back. And overall, it could be like a loss of maybe... They could actually even that out. Let's be fair, with some players that they could sell.
They could even it out. I think, obviously, a lot of people, that their 2 most valuable assets are 100% Kane and Son.
Untouchables.
And every season it's like, I wonder if Kane. Not so much Son, but still, could be interest from Son. But every season it's more talking about Kane. But I think obviously he's priority number 1. You've got to keep him at the club. But if you're looking at players who could potentially be shifted, I'm sure we could go through and start picking apart loads of players in that team. But I've gone for 2 priority players, which I think could free up a little bit of money and average them maybe spending like half of what we originally said. By selling Dele Alli to a PSG, I think you could get around 35 to 40 million, maybe 50. And I think Eric Lamela as well is another player which he has actually played for Spurs. He has been getting some games, which is quite strange to see him in that side. And he's been playing a lot of his games in the centre as almost like a 10. But around 15 million, I think, could be recouped from him. And that could make a huge dent off their summer signings.
Yeah, I think that I was going to go for those 2 as well. You look at Dele Alli, they could probably squeeze about 50 million out of PSG. I mean, they're willing to overspend on anyone, let's be honest. So they've got the money, why not? And Lamela, he's providing nothing in terms of game time. Yeah, he provides depth in the cups, but if we're looking at strengthening that right winger position, we're bringing in, either Leon Bailey, or if we're bringing in Hervin Lozano, he's not going to be needed at all. And we've got the depth. Sergi, Bergwijn is still there. People seem to forget that Bergwijn is still at the club, and I think that's key to note that they still have that depth, because he can play right wing or left wing. He can play off both flanks. So either way, I think that they've still got a strong team, and I think they could even sell Lucas Moura.
Yeah, I think there's definitely legs behind it. I mean, we'd love to know some of your guys' opinions of who or what Spurs could potentially do to progress. But we did have an interesting little segment to add to the end of this, didn't we? We did ask some of our followers over on our Instagram account some opinions of Spurs. And I think you have those opinions, Reece, to kind of share on the podcast.
Oh, I do. And I have quite a few, actually. So the first one I'm going to do is one of our resident guests and lovely men, the King of Tamworth himself, Sam. Lovely man. He just says that Spurs are frustrating, and I can't argue with him there.
Thumbs up.
As a Spurs fan himself, I think we've heard from a couple of Spurs fans here, and 3 former guests of the show. So our next one is an avid fan of the Average Pundits, Sam Skirving, who always interacts with our stories. So Sam_Skirving, he's actually put 3 parts to this.
Yeah.
So I'll read it out in full. As a Spurs fan, there's been times this season where I've been seriously thinking we can win the league, and then other times, like we can even get into. I'm guessing that means like we can't even get into Europe.
Yeah.
Either way, I think we've shown what we can do when we play as a team. I think if Spurs were to be that complete unit, they're all on the same page. I think there's just a lack of communication in that squad.
Yeah.
And I think that what we've done now, we've shifted some of the dead weight that's not needed to be there. Dele Alli just screams bad. Oh goodness me, that was a voice cracking off. Anyways, shifting the deadwood, Dele Alli just screams bad vibes for me. We're keeping that in, by the way.
That's fine. Yeah, I'm more than happy for
that. We're shifting the bad vibes in Dele Alli. We're shifting dead weight in Lamella, potentially Lucas Moura, and the net spend could be about what, £20 million for two world-class players.
Yeah.
So either way, I think Sam, I think you've got a very good opinion there. When they're playing as a team, where I don't even think Jose knows his strongest 11, and we're over halfway through the season. So we'll go to the next one. The gaffer, manager of Stourbridge Ladies, Harry O'Neill, lovely man. I love Harry. We should get him back on.
Lovely man.
So he says he loves Jose, as we all do, and but negative and off-ball football is outdated and won't win titles. Joe, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Jose Mourinho criticism, you can find it anywhere you look now. His old mentality was what made him so great. He won countless titles at huge clubs all over Europe, but he's walked into a completely different job at Spurs, a completely different team to what he's used to, a completely different status to what he's used to. Spurs are a big club in the UK, but they're not a big club with, masses of trophy history behind them, and there's no clear path going forward. One minute it looks like they have it, the next minute they don't. So I totally agree with him there. He's definitely a man who knows what he's on about in terms of tactics. So very good inclusion.
On to the next one. We have 34R1E. Maybe that spells Earl in in sort of numbers. Good old Earl. Thank you for your suggestion and your answer. Actually, it goes as follows, and I quote: "They had a good start. Bunch of bottle jobs though. Going to be hoping they get into the Europa League next season." I can't help agree to that at this point. The rate that Spurs are going, they had a really good start. They really did, and we were talking about them potentially winning the league because Son and Kane were the duo taking over.
Incredible.
We've seen the progressive fatigue of those two players, and the rest of the team can't produce. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, well, no, 100%. It is genuinely 1 minute fantastic, the next minute completely off the ball, which I think is a lot of trend to a lot of these comments that we're having on the podcast in this little segment. So I totally agree. It can all be Kane and Son. Hopefully some of the players that we've recommended may find a certain chairman at Spurs. You never know.
And speaking of chairman, the chairman of the Gloucester accent, Dominic Hebron, obviously former guest and kind of step-in host when he can.
Yep.
So thank you to Dom for all your contributions to Average Pundits over the past year.
Yep.
So he feels hot and cold about Spurs. A great team on paper, but poor in execution. And that's kind of this video's. I wanted to end on that because that's kind of this video's entire, sort of message is that Spurs have a fantastic team. They just don't work together.
No. And Dom is obviously I've grown up with Dom. Dom's one of the biggest Spurs fans I know, and he religiously watches. He attends when he can. He knows Spurs. He knows Spurs. He knows how he likes to see his team play. And he summed it up perfectly, as we mentioned, hot and cold. And you can't be hot and cold and win titles, can you? They've got a real test coming up now. They've got to end the season strongly. They've got to win a League Cup. If they win that League Cup, it could be fantastic. But they will have a game and a half on their hands against a City team, which are starting to be absolutely fantastic again with the players they've got. But again, with this little segment we've had, it's been very eye-opening, especially to hear from Spurs fans.
Yeah, it's great, to have fans come in and speak on their club, and to get, obviously the gaffer's a Villa fan as well. It's nice to hear different variations of opinions. So make sure that you're following us on Instagram, The Average Pundits. Go over to our Instagram and check out any stories for future podcasts. Normally there'll be a story put up on a Tuesday. Make sure you're interacting, and you'll get a shout out on the podcast.
Yes, you will indeed. The Instagram is where we post a lot of our interactive segments. But don't just have to follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter as well. Instagram, we are The Average Pundits, as well as our Facebook, The Average Pundits. And you can find us on Twitter at Pundits Average, where we post a lot of upcoming news for the podcast, and we get interactive in some of the game and comments as well that you're seeing in European football and, of course, in the Premier League. So thank you very much, guys, as always. And if you do want to come on this podcast, you can get a hold of us at theaveragepundits@outlook.com for any potential inquiries, any information you may want to know about the podcast. If you're listening to this on your favorite streaming services, give us a follow, because that's how you'll get all of your updates, and that's how you'll be able to take us on the go. And if you're watching on YouTube, the all-important like and subscribe. It's so crucial, and it helps us to grow. It helps us to keep producing the content that you guys want. It would be absolutely fantastic. We're on like 125 subscribers right now, which again is very, very promising to see. And we're also nearing on YouTube alone 10,000 views on YouTube as a platform, which is again crazy to think of. So thank you so much for the support. But a lot of growth and a lot of exciting stuff coming in the future, Reese.
Yeah, absolutely. We're an 8th, as you saw on the Instagram, or if you didn't, go and follow, and then like the latest post, which tells you that we're an eighth of the way to 1,000 subscribers. The goal above our heads right here that totals how many subscribers away we are. We're 125 out of 1,000 so far. So make sure that we're on the way to storming that goal. It's been an absolute crazy ride so far. Make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure you're following, all that good stuff. Make sure you share this podcast with any football lovers and any Spurs fans that you might know, in order to get their opinions, to comment down below or message us over on social media.
Definitely. Very much so. Thank you very much, guys, as always, and we will see you next time.
For the latest football content, subscribe to The Average Pundits on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite streaming service, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Don't forget to like and share this video.